5 years, has been in command of the Starship Enterprise as Captain Jean-Luc Picard. He had a hard act to follow. William Shatner as Captain James T. Kirk on the original Star Trek series, which aired from 66 to 69. How did you experience or feel about becoming part of what you called an American icon?
Yes, that's how the role was described to me in the week that it was offered to me. I was fortunate, you see, because I didn't know what was meant by an American icon at that time. I had no experience of the extent to which Star Trek was threaded through the cultural life of North America. And I'm grateful for that, because had I known what was out there in terms of expectation and the number of fans and the history of the show, I would never have got out of bed that first morning to shoot the first day's work.
It is truly an American icon. In fact, it can be said, I think you will agree, that there's no cultural phenomenon in the United States that has ever approached it in magnitude.
Not in my experience, not only because it's a successful TV show. There have been other successful TV shows. MASH is the one that most particularly comes to mind. But even MASH didn't survive 25 years as this has done, although we've not been in production all of that time.
The first series began in 1966, got dismal reviews, continued through 1969, 79 episodes. Then, as far as television was concerned, while that appeared in numerous replays, it went dead until 1987 when you took over. Is that correct?
That's when we began filming the first season.
And you succeeded William Shatner as the new captain of the USS Enterprise, but you have already produced more episodes than Shatner appeared in.
That's correct. We're now filming our 111th episode, which makes it about 30 more, and we shall have, by the end of the season, we shall have done 126. Now,
Star Trek has spawned 100 novels, 200 fan clubs in the United States. The merchandise that it has produced, the pins, the drinking cups.
The industry.
The industry is $500 million, correct?
I'm told that at Paramount it's known as the franchise.
The franchise. So it's enormously big. How do you account for the fact that it is such an icon?
I think initially, the show is excellent storytelling. Storytelling has always been the very heart and center of any good drama, whether it's stage or TV or film. And we tell terrific stories on Star Trek. And that's what will keep our audience from switching channels and will keep us with us week after week and build the audience. Last week, I was told we had a 15.9 rating, which is simply sensational.
About 25 million viewers?
Between 25 and 30 million viewers, I understand, for a syndicated hour-long drama series.
Correct. You're not on the network. Paramount is syndicated.
That's correct.
When you took over as Captain Jean-Luc Picard, a Frenchman, you were the BBC accent. You had taken over from a captain whose name was James Tiberius Kirk. The captain that you portray is 180 degrees. It's totally opposite, I think you would agree, from the character of Kirk. Picard is cerebral. He is diplomatic. One might say that he's calculating. He's perhaps a little bit cool. Spock is no longer, Mr. Spock is no longer in the series. You take over some of his logicality, whereas Kirk was passionate. He was very extrovertish. He had a very high libido quotient. Now, why do you think there was such a shift of that magnitude?
I think that the two different shows reflect the times when they were made. That show is very much a show of the 60s. We are now set, I think, 90-odd or 70-odd years in the future, beyond the time of the first series. So not only must we reflect the changes that are imagined to have happened in the 24th century, you know, we have to project ourselves into how would we have advanced and developed beyond that first series, 400 years from now. But also, we reflect calculatingly as well as spontaneously the manners and styles and modes of the late 1980s.
And the 90s.
And the 90s, and who knows how much longer.
You're saying that Kirk was really a leader for the 60s. And the new leader, as portrayed by you, is an extension of the reality that exists today. For example, one might say that your portrayal is not dissimilar to Gorbachev, or it's not dissimilar in ways to George Bush, or it's not dissimilar to John Major. in Great Britain. However, there is a Kirk on
You
the...
significantly leave out Margaret Thatcher and all of that.
Well, there is a Kirk on the world scene today, correct me if I'm wrong, and that's Boris Yeltsin. True?
He's a very charismatic politician.
He's passionate.
Yes.
He's rumored to have a very strong libido, as
A correction.
Kirk.
You see, Picard is not without passion. Picard matches and shares Kirk's passion. He shows it and uses it in a different way. The one thing that they do have in common, of course, is that they're both explorers. And essentially, that's why the Enterprise is there. It is to find out what is out there, and that they share together.
Well, you were selected because one of the...
But you know, one thing I want to pick up that you just said, because it is important. We have seen in the last 3 years, we've seen in the last 6 months, the effects of people at the highest level of international politics continuing to talk to one another, to keep lines of communication open, to converse, to negotiate, to use diplomatic means. And we've seen the massive improvements in our world as a result of that.
Yeah.
Now, I think in this respect, Picard does reflect that particular set of attitudes.
You see George Bush do that during the Persian Gulf War, where he internationalized it, and he engaged the international community. It
seemed to me that, certainly as far as this country was concerned, as with the Falkland War in England, that war was very much a public relations exercise for his party.
One quick question. When the producer saw you, did he then design the character of Picard after seeing you to fit you? Or did he have Picard in mind and said, he's my guy?
You would have to ask Gene Roddenberry that question. And I don't know why, when they saw me acting Sheridan and Congreve and Oscar Wilde, why they would imagine me as being the captain of the Enterprise. At first, I thought I was going to be the token Brit, not the captain.
We'll be right back. Is there any correspondence between the longevity of Cheers, which was a very successful show, 10-year run, and the longevity, 25 years this past September, of Star Trek?
Well, certainly they have better jokes than we have. It's a wonderful show. I think the identification with a group of individuals, a familiar group of, a family of individuals is very, very important. You know, one of the things that makes a TV show successful, and that is repetition. Seeing certain similar things again and again and again. It's reassuring, you know. It makes you feel that the world is not changing that fast.
Audience identifies with the characters?
Yes, I think they do. You have to identify with a character to laugh at him. So in Cheers, that must work.
They feel comfortable. Audience feels comfortable with the character. It is said, and I'd like to draw this out a little bit, that there is considerable philosophical substance, there's considerable theological substance, and there's considerable issues substance within Star Trek. You agree?
It's a show about ideas.
Let's talk about the premiere last September of Star Trek. You were then entering your 4th year, correct?
5th year.
5th year, okay. In that program, a civil war takes place within the Klingon Empire. You remember that?
Correct. There is a battle for the leadership of the Empire.
Battle for the leadership of the Empire. Now, one of the characters whose name is Data. Data is an android. You remember him? Do you recall what happened during that premiere?
Yes, he disobeyed orders. He was given a set of instructions by me, and because he was the man on the spot, he was in the very heart of the situation. He chose to ignore those orders and to follow his own instinct and reading of the situation. And as such, of course, he was, in fact, he offered himself at the end of that story for court-martial. I refused to accept it because what he had done had been proved to be the correct decision. And I commended him for that, and also commented that in the past, many individuals and many parties, many movements, many philosophies have hidden behind that claim that they were only obeying orders. And it can be pernicious, of course. In his case, he refused to obey orders and did the right thing. And of course, Picard, although he is seen to be sometimes a somewhat solemn and rather rigid leader in some respects, is in fact very flexible insofar as it concerns the other members of his crew. He wants them to use initiative. It's a great characteristic of Picard. Now,
Jean-Luc Picard is the captain of the USS Enterprise, correct? And the USS Enterprise represents the Union of Federated Planets.
Correct.
For those few people who live in a tree and have not seen the show, all right? And just to draw this out a little bit more, Data is in charge of one of the spaceships that's part of the aerial flotilla, if you will, that accompanies the Enterprise. And he resists you when you say, get into the pattern of the rest of us. He refuses to do it, and he goes, he scouts out the Romulans, and he successfully destroys the Romulans and thus effectively ends the Civil War.
He exposes a conspiracy.
Okay. Then he comes to you and he says, punish me because I've been disobedient. And you say, it is true that the end does not justify the means. Nevertheless, there are people who have fled behind that dictum for generations. You did not, and there are circumstances when you should not. You should not blindly obey. Did you have anybody in mind in real life?
We have recently had a case in the United Kingdom of a soldier who refused to fight in the Gulf War, and he has been court-martialed and sentenced because of that. He said that it was against his conscience. Of course, it raises an interesting moral situation here. How can war be against the conscience of a soldier, someone who has agreed to put on a uniform? But in that instance, he felt that that war was wrong, and he would not participate in it.
You didn't have in mind Oliver North, who claimed that he was obeying orders, correct?
I did not have in mind Oliver North.
There is also, one could associate this to Germany and the Nazis, many of whom were Nazis and said that they were obeying orders. Anyway, it is philosophy, and justifying the means and not justifying the means is an interesting philosophical angle, and it occurs there, and it's so that there is a lot beneath the bells and whistles of Star Wars. Something else occurred to me in that premiere, too. Within the starship, there is integration. You have blacks, correct?
Oh, yes. We have blacks, and we have races from all over the galaxy.
But outside the starship, there are planetary feuds going on, and the races on the planets are warring against each other, correct?
Correct.
So it seems as though you're saying that on Earth, we have licked the ethnicity problem that is plaguing the globe right now. Witness Italy, that is repelling the Albanians because it wants to preserve its homogeneity, right?
Correct. Nations as we know them now on this planet do not exist by the 24th century. That's why I always describe Picard not as a Frenchman, but as a European, because I'm sure that in another 400 years, that's how we will be. Even the English, who will resist it the longest, will regard themselves as Europeans.
But the ethnicity confrontations that we're seeing all over the planet today exist in Star Wars on a higher level between the planets.